Right. We're here with my dear friend Ian Michael Hebert of Holos Global in Costa Rica. Real pleasure to have you here.
So good to be here, Eduardo.
Si, senor. Um, so Ian Michael, I created this little Land Steward Alliance series just to give people real downloads of what it's like to be a steward of a project, of a home, living abroad. Um, just some truth. And you've been a friend that we've had these kind of recordings before, and we've talked about a variety of subjects. And I think it's kind of a critical time in all the ways, in a good way, in an interesting way in the world. And a lot of people looking at the reality of so what's going on in Costa Rica in our case. What's it like to move to an alternative neighborhood or into an eco village or residential project? Some people are looking to build these dream projects and think it's going to be a walk in the park, retreat, community. So, I think it covers the gamut there of just a lot of your experience. So, would love to turn it over to you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Ed. Means a lot, our friendship and this invitation to share a little bit about the journey. I think what I'll start with is just a little story time and kind of what my journey's been, who I am, how I ended up here at Holos in Costa Rica, and and then some of the lessons that I've learned along the way and where we're headed. But I think this story really begins in Alaska. I think back to my early days of being a kid, and my parents put me to work from a young age, going out and getting coal from the coal bunker to feed the stove, and harvesting carrots and taking care of the chickens and grabbing the eggs. And we had a very back to the earth kind of semi-rural lifestyle in Alaska, hunting and fishing. And so I had these back to the land values really instilled early on in my life, and also values of resilience. And living in the middle of Alaska, it was, you know, 50 below, 60 below in the middle of winter, no sunlight. And you have to really prepare for those times by growing a strong garden and hunting and having a good food cache. So I had those principles of living off the land instilled in me since I was really little. But there was a point where I decided that I was going to become a vegetarian when I was 17. And Alaska is not vegetarian friendly. You can only store so many potatoes and carrots, and then people revert to eating caribou and moose and bears and all of those things. So I got the idea when I was 17. All right, my way to living an ethical lifestyle on Earth is to live in Central America and farm yams. So
Got it.
um, I pursued that dream by hitchhiking when I was 18 after I graduated high school down the coast, and I made it as far as the middle of Mexico. And I found a vegetarian restaurant, became friends with the owner, and he encouraged me to go up into the jungle in the forests above Puerto Vallarta and to go waterfall hopping. So I went up into these waterfalls in rural Mexico, and I had this really powerful experience behind a waterfall that kind of instilled in me the power of water and what a transformational technology that is. So then I had this two-pronged desire. I had a desire to be near water, and I had a desire to grow food. But at 18, super idealistic, I ran out of money and decided that I needed to return to the States and get a job. So I moved to Colorado, taught snowboarding, and then this whole chapter of life unfolded that included going to undergraduate school, having kids, becoming a home builder. And during that time, I wrote a degree in eco resort design and development. And I decided that building a retreat center was probably the best way for me to have a farm, find investors, and build this lifestyle that I really wanted to live. So did the degree in eco resort design and development, helped build out a retreat center in the middle of Alaska at a hot springs, Chino Hot Springs, and we were growing tomatoes and lettuce all winter long by using technology, by using geothermal power and heat. And so that kind of like at least scratched that itch of being a vegetarian and wanting to live off the land in a really wicked place like Alaska. But eventually, I decided I didn't want to just be building houses and working on retreat centers, and that I wanted to better understand the human condition. So I moved to San Francisco, and did a master's degree in psychology. And as I completed that work, I again needed to make some money, so I moved to a place called Esalen Institute in Big Sur, and I helped them rebuild their infrastructure. It's kind of the grandmother of retreat centers in the
Yeah.
States, and has an epic farm, and my kids could roam free, and we had hot springs and transformational retreats happening. And that really showed me an example of what I wanted to live inside of in the world. So as I completed my time at Esalen, I got inspired to start this company, Holos. This was about 2018, 2019. And the inspiration came from a guy named Stan Groff, who started holotropic breath work and was a psychiatrist that did a lot of work with expanded states of consciousness. And I proposed to him that we build something in Costa Rica because I had this lifelong dream that was still alive inside my heart, and started looking for land in Costa Rica. And I remembered that time back in Mexico when I was 18 and how much I loved waterfalls. So my seeking in Costa Rica became centered around waterfalls and seeing if there was a place that could could inspire me. So 2019 was the first time that I stepped into the Diamante Valley here in Costa Rica, and it is a waterfall heaven. Behind me here in my office is a 600-foot waterfall that the Diamante Valley is known for, the Diamante Falls. And then the Diamante River comes along the property that we have here at Holos and meets the Baru River. And the Baru River is known for Nyaka Waterfall, which is this massive two-tiered waterfall that a lot of tourists come to. So we're kind of sitting on this landmass of a hill or mountain above these two rivers. So I came here in 2019, but didn't have any funds and hadn't put Holos fully together yet. And then started to run retreats to gain momentum for this idea of building a retreat center in Costa Rica. And that was early 2020. And for those of you that were around in 2020, that's when there was the COVID pandemic, and um, it wasn't a great time to build a retreat center to raise money for anything hospitality related. And so I moved down here in March of 2020 just to get to know the local community and really see, is this the land that Holos wants to be birthed through? And that was the chapter where you and I really got to know each other better. And I remember us doing a similar talk to this, sitting outside the little cabin next to Domingo's house and starting to try to generate some interest for this vision that we both hold of how do we live on land in a good way that is integrated with the local community, that regenerates the land, and where we can produce food that we can eat and drink clean water. Seemed pretty simple. And so during that chapter that I was here in the Diamante Valley, where we spent a lot of time exploring waterfalls and seeing where there could be trails, I realized how sacred it is to steward a vision like this, and how important it is to have these sanctuaries or nodes of resilience, but also just nodes of sanity, because the whole
Hmm.
world was going crazy. People are, stockpiling toilet paper, um, and I know for a lot of people that was a really difficult time.
Yeah.
But for us here, it was fairly insulated from a lot of the madness and challenges that people were experiencing in early 2020. And so it just further fueled this desire to anchor a project here. So yeah, that's a good start to the story. I don't know if you have any questions from that point, but then I can talk about how we built Holos and what I've learned along the way.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I remember when I entered the end of the story, it was just walking the land and hearing a lot of the things that are built now as visions. And also, whatever that quote is, smooth seas don't make a great sailor. I've seen every speed bump along the way of your journey. And they fall into categories because you shared your personal story, and so you're also living the experience. It's one thing to know about something or practice something spiritually. When you live it, day to day, you're like a part of it and working on it on your unique part. And so I think living it, a lot of people have seen just, yeah, moving to another country. You chose based on really simple but important criteria. Like I love waterfalls. And so I think people, when they come here and they're like, Ed, what do you think about this or that? And, Stephen Brooks told me, like, live in a climate, you don't need climate control, mostly, unless you have some humidity issues that you really just need to handle. I get it. There's no shame. But these kind of things, like I like rivers. I don't need necessarily ocean. Like, let me be clear. It really simplifies it. And then you look at, you said the word resilience. What are resilient communities and areas? And what I like, one thing that I just wanted to highlight for practical kind of feedback to people is there's a certain kind of person when they tell me that they're looking for water security, resilience, growing their food, real community, and other things that are in different levels of tangibility. I mentioned the South, and I mentioned everything from, Ojochal, Uvita, Dominical, Tinamaste and the whole area you're in, Diamante Valley, then San Isidro, Chiripo, because it is really a bioregion with a story of water that flows from the mountains, communities that interchange, healers, organic markets. So that whole thing that people put in their decks, it's not like one project. It's a collection of projects that produce, I think, an ecosystem more than an eco village. I haven't, what I like is also is a lot of times people expect certain things that we're not evolved yet for. So when I
Mhm.
see projects like yours and others fitting into a story of place of this area that you moved into, I see places where you host groups and events in different lengths and times, and I see places where people live. Whether the word is eco-village or residential, regenerative residential community, I don't know. People have a lot of different definitions for things, but it's pretty clear when you're living in good harmony with the earth. It's pretty clear
Yeah.
when you're producing your food and some of these higher values and treating each other well. Um, so that's the part I think that we could flow into that interests me now, which is like there are people who might be interested in building a project like you're building or being part of one. What's been your experience and like some lessons learned, some just little nuggets that you think are from this year and from your recent now, that you're
Yeah.
really living into?
Yeah. Thank you for that. I want to make sure that what I share is both encouraging and sobering and realistic. And so I'm going to try my best to find that balance. Um,
And I'm gonna keep moving back as the sun is setting and it's
Perfect. So, yeah, I don't want to build any illusions in people that it's like that it's easy. Um, Yesterday I was crying about my life and, the challenges um, and at the same time, the day before, I'm jumping off of 30-foot waterfalls and taking people down to the river and enjoying the sun and eating bananas off the tree and going down to our permaculture center and picking up my basket of food. And it's a really beautiful lifestyle. I think that there's no place that's perfect. Every place has its challenges. And like you said, it's about what challenges do you want to choose and what are the values that you have that help steer your North Star for where you want to live and what you want to do. And as you shared, this region is very wellness and holistically minded, and more so from the local perspective and kind of a regional perspective, there's a lot of farming. There's a lot of food production in this region. San Isidro, which is the town about a half an hour from us, it's the second biggest city in Costa Rica. Saint Isidro was the patron saint of farmers. And so that kind of speaks to the ethos of this area already. And I think it's really important not to impose our ideas of a place, but to work within the existing culture and ecosystem that you're coming into. And so people here respect when you are putting a lot of energy into farming. And that's been a big piece of what we're doing here on the land. The infrastructure when we came here was a trapiche, which is a place that people crush sugarcane using cattle. And there was cattle, sugarcane, lemon trees, a couple little cabins, and some trails.
I still
And
think I have a bottle of some of that sugar cane syrup. It was the most concentrated sugar I've ever received.
it's it's amazing. And it's interesting that like something as simple as that, like sugarcane, is so meaningful to the local community. So this Saturday and Sunday, we had some community events, and Saturday was really devoted to the local San Salvador community and the traditions of the people that have lived here.
Hmm.
And so we brought in the bowls and we set up the trapiche and Domingo, the day before, chopped a bunch of sugarcane with our farm crew, and then woke up at 4 in the morning and started the process and crushed the sugarcane with the cows. We cleaned up it's a big vat with a fire underneath of it, and so we cleaned all that up. And they were boiling down sugarcane all day to create tapa dulces, like big sugar cakes. And then also they had other candies and things that they made during the day. But the number of people, like the elders and kind of adults of San Salvador, that came to me and said, "Oh my gosh, I haven't done a trapiche since I was a kid.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for this." It's like it's a really big part of their culture. So we've got a strong farming culture here.
Let's double
And
click on that for 1 second, just because I don't want it
yeah.
to get lost. In almost all the conversations I've had with different people here about this subject, the point comes up of what you can do, gentrification, neocolonialization. One way or another, we've even had ticos on these conversations talking about the difficult, boundaries and lines regarding some of the projects in Nero Rotina and that whole Machuca Valley. And it was a very beautiful conversation, went back and forth because it's not an issue that you can just say, hey, and that. And so one of the things I remember that one of the first activities when I was living in that cabin with the bats, with my partner at the time, and there was an event for the local community where you just came and people talked and shared, and you shared a little bit about the project. And later I came to work with Bill Reed from Regenesis to study regenerative development. And I'm like, Bill, so what's this all about? And I'm expecting like crazy master planning. And he's like, yeah, so for like 6 months we do story of place and da da da. And I'm like, what's that? And at the end of lots of things, it was really talking to the people of the community and getting a context and learning about what's needed, not imposing. Um, Things like you said, like even cultural things that for many ticos that I know, they're like, we've lost, like how to make these ocarinas that a young tico that I know helped teach a tribe who had forgotten. He had printed the 3D printed it in the museum with the University of Costa Rica. So I do think it's a very interesting and very rich tapestry of how to preserve local culture, how to reinvigorate local culture for foreigners and locals so that it's available to learn about because yeah, there's no escaping it to some sense. Like Francisco Grau from our group, and you know him well, he was saying, look, as a Costa Rican, yes, it's part of our economy that land grows in value and people sell that land. And there's entire studies of what those Costa Rican families sociologically, socioeconomics, like what they're doing with the money. And so it's an area to study and listen to. But I've seen you take some steps towards that I think both individuals and project founders need to take toward
Mhm.
having that right relationship. And Stephen Brooks, by the way, the last thing I'll say, and then I'll shut it. Stephen was saying how, yes, them as developers, when he did his project, could do certain things, and sure, it could have been more. Oh, it said resume recording. Hold on. Sure, there could have been more done, but it's also on the individual owners of lots, the homeowners.
Mhm.
What are you going to do? You're going to get involved in the town and the community center and the projects and the school. And so I also think, there's thing called diffusion of responsibility where it's really easy to point the finger at you or at somebody working on a project, but
Mhm.
yeah, there's also people who are collectively trying to birth their home or this
Yeah.
project. So how do you see that
I
whole?
I really love um, the residents that have bought lots at Holos and the way that they engage with the local community and how they appreciate indigenous knowledge. I have too many examples to mention on this call, but We have one woman, she completed her house this year. She's very community minded and used to work in nonprofits. So she has been running our service program. We have service guests from all over the world, Costa Ricans,
Mm,
all Latin American countries, Europeans. We've had service guests from probably 20 different countries, and
beautiful.
they help with the farm and with the indigenous crew that we have doing different tasks. But our newest initiative, led by our service coordinator, who's a resident here, is to help the local school with like renovations and cleaning things up. We also provide them with a lot of food from our farm. So we have this partnership with the school, which is really beautiful. Um, there's residents that recently have made visits to Baruka, which is a little town, 5 hours south of here or 5 hours away, where a group of indigenous people live that used to be the original stewards of this valley. So likely the first tribe that was living here that we have some recorded evidence of is the Chorotega likely, and
Mm,
then the Baruka people, and like the Baru River is likely named after the Baruka people. So the indigenous people at one point or another either left or were forced off the land here. And then in
yeah.
Costa Rica, there was something similar to a homesteading act that we had in the US where there were farmers that came in and they, t took a piece of land and started, um, you know, cutting down trees and running cattle farms and different kinds of farms. So there's a little bit of education that we've had with the local community as well of like, okay, yes, we are the newest people in this area, and your ancestors, there's like 5 families that were the original people that kind of settled this little region. Your ancestors did something similar. They moved into the area and set up their farms 100 years ago.
Yeah.
And so we've actually brought indigenous people from the Baruka tribe back into the community, helped them establish their lives here, helped them to preserve their language by showing that there's real value in it, helping them to preserve their practices like these tattoos.
Mm,
It's like a temporary tattoo that's created out of a sap from a tree here, and one of our indigenous farm workers gets paid, a really good rate for doing his arts and different things by community members or retreats that come in. And then he'll interpret in your spirit what is the symbology that's going to help you in this next phase of your life. And the tattoos last a couple weeks. That's just one example, but they're
mm,
also really beautiful artisans, and so we sell their goods. And so we're really doing what we can, or what we know to do to help weave in. But the whole process of weaving with a local community or getting to know the indigenous roots of a place is a really long process of listening and responding. It's like we may have our ideas of what it is to honor another culture or to come in a light-handed way or in a collaborative way. But I think it really comes down to just being a really good listener. And maybe I learned some of that in Alaska in the long winters where you don't have much of an option but to kind of learn to listen to people and tell stories. So yeah, that's been a humbling part about this journey is having the best of intentions and then learning that like, oh, maybe that's not actually what they're wanting or needing. And this Trapiche experience this weekend was a great example where it was like, I knew this needed to happen for a long time, but it's the first time we've done a big Trapiche event with the local community, and it was like incredibly successful in terms of building our fabric of trust and connection to the community. So
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
that was
definitely
that
just
was
want to highlight what you said that it's a long process. There's
mhm.
individual simple things like bringing a cultural event of Trapiche back for many people, even locals who have forgotten and haven't seen that. So I do think it's simple acts that bring community together. Um, and I do think that you brought up a big point, which is there are the indigenous tribes, the Baruca, the Chortega, as you mentioned. I spoke to a Chortega elder, Pedro Pablo in Nosara, and I was like, wow, so you're the real indigenous? And he's like, kind of, we came from Mexico. And I was like, what? He was like, yeah, a lot of us don't even know our language. There are projects that are restoring their, education in their own indigenous language. So I was like, wow, I was so confused. So I'm like, you're indigenous people who came from Mexico here. Then, as you said, there was kind of the homesteading time in Costa Rica where a lot of the families were agricultors, and had their plot,
Mhm.
and that was then those indigenous people moved out. So it's not so much some American moving. There's already a stage,
Yeah.
and now is this
Yeah.
stage, and some of those people are getting well. Some stay. I see a lot of mix in places, but yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and so we worked really collaboratively with the local farmers, those that had wanted to sell land because their kids moved to the cities and they're too old to keep farming. And,
yeah,
they came to the Trapiche and they're like, oh, yeah, thanks, for doing this. And why don't you come over for coffee more often? And, so we're weaving that. You touched on something that reminded me of a story that's really interesting, but the Chorotega, the literal translation that I found through my research is those that flee,
mhm,
and they were fleeing from northern Mexico, and they were in a war with the Huichol people or the Wirikuta, and the Wirikuta are the ones that are the peyote stewards of northern Mexico, and so we've done a lot of work with different elders. So we've had tribal gatherings at Holos where we brought the different tribal leaders from Costa Rica so that they could talk about their common challenges and support each other, and
yeah,
also to hear what they have to say about the land. But we've also brought elders from other places, and one of the places that we've brought elders from is from Wirikuta, from the Huichol. So about 1800 years ago, there was this war between these two tribes, the Chorotega and the Wirikuta. And there was a portion of the Wirikuta that were fighters and a portion that were more medicine people. Anyway, the Chorotega moved all the way down here. We've been hosting for the last 4 years, and we're going to host again in February, this elder who comes from the Wirikuta. And he came down to the land and we did some really powerful prayers with the land. And I could see the forgiveness between these two tribes of like 2000 years ago, like the healing that happened by him coming all the way from Mexico, coming and realizing that this was Chorotega land and then honoring the ancestors of this land. There was something that happened in my awareness where I could see these 2000 years of tribal challenges just kind of like being made whole. And so
mm,
yeah, super powerful moment. There's a lot more to that story. Um, there was a Rinpoche, like a Buddhist from Tibet that was here at the same time,
yeah,
who's building the World Peace University at the birthplace of the Buddha. And
mhm.
he was there when that blessing took place from the Huichol. So, anyways, lots of stories that if anybody comes to visit Holos, I can go into story time around a fire sometime. But
Definitely
um,
can.
the sun is getting more intense for you, so I want to honor your time. And
Oh, no, it's
there's lots more I could share. I mean, this is kind of like there's 5 years of lessons here now in building the initial phase of Holos. We have about 8 houses built. I
yeah,
think there's 10 lots that are still available, but we have learned a lot. And I had this idealism coming here, like, oh, it's going to be so much easier to farm in Costa Rica than it is in Alaska. And so I'm going to do this project and I'm going to integrate into the local community and honor them and have a farm, and everything is going to be heaven on earth. And there's lots of moments where it definitely feels that way. And then there's lots of moments where maybe I leave and go check on my kids in the States and I come back and the grass is 3 feet high and
sure.
the fruit trees are getting choked out by cattle grasses and the
Yeah.
roads are falling apart because of the most recent big rains. And the reality is this landscape is always alive. It's always moving, which has its beauty and also its challenges. And I think that one thing I've learned is like this idea of pura vida, which pura vida for me, it means like chill out and like everything is all good. But there's a certain cadence to the way that I think the Costa Rican culture moves that may have evolved out of necessity. Because if you come with a Western mindset of like, I'm gonna, always keep up with all the grasses and I'm
Yeah.
going to do this and I'm going to do that. Nature is just like, oh, that's really cute, but
Mhm.
I'm actually in charge. So it's more of like a feminine principle of listening to nature and responding in a way that is more balanced than coming in with more of like a masculine mentality of like, oh yeah, I'm going to accomplish this. And like, I know something about farming, which I'm constantly humbled by and try to pull in different perspectives from permaculture and the indigenous brothers and the farmers that live down the road. And so it's really, there's a living wisdom that just comes with time. And like there's nothing else you can do except for settle into a place and have the patience and the willingness to be shaped by that place. And so, I'm on that journey, of like being shaped by place. And it's similar to you. It's like, oh, I'm in the sun and I'm getting my forehead baked, and I need to move over to another corner where it's a little
It was so
shadier.
much better here, by the way. It's like breezy. It's actually a little chilly almost. I'm like, I gotta turn
Yeah.
the fan down.
Like, we got to listen to our bodies. We have to adapt as we go. We got to listen to the local culture and what's happening and be responsive. And I think that that's kind of the lessons of anybody building a project like this is how responsible are you? Like, what is your ability to respond to any given moment? And so yeah, I've gained a lot of responsibilities. Sometimes they're too much for me, and then there's that principle that you were sharing, which I really want to dive deeper with you on at some point of like, how do you really share responsibilities as a community? How do you encourage people to really take like a role in the co-creation of a place and not just rely on a founder or the
Yeah.
boss or the manager or whatever it is. And we're learning, we're trying to figure those things out, like what really inspires people. And yeah,
Yeah, I
that's
think
where we're
that's an area where you said like, we could talk about this on a future call and we should. I don't like when people do these like one-time things and it's like we have so many topics to cover. But that topic is interesting because the thing you're asking for is for me individual responsibility, individual leadership, people really stepping into the next evolution of where I hope humanity is going. And we hung out with the crew from Leap Forward that, like I dedicate a lot of my time to. We actually fought the cattle grasses of a finca that was purchased for the nonprofit, kind of as a home base and education space. And we started planting fruit trees. And Talia, my friend who lives there, was like, "Wow, this cattle grass." You met Talia, I believe. And yeah,
Mhm,
I mean, it was not easy, but I just saw the process of really understanding that humans are to a certain extent not where we need to be evolutionarily, and nothing's wrong to self-lead. You mentioned the points that would be nice, and I think we are getting there. Like Ronit just launched a thing called Dear Future Human, a collection of letters to future humans, because it is possible if we understand and step into a certain level of responsibility that we could treat each other well, the land well, ourselves, and we're kind of being forced into that evolution. It's not just that you're hanging out in Costa Rica by a waterfall. You saw
mhm,
changes the same way my dad saw in the Soviet Union and moved to the US. And then he was like, we should go somewhere else, and you're the next generation. So I came here. And it's like, okay, where can we live well? And of course, we want to treat the there well. And maybe there are things we have to listen to and spread out and do what people have been doing since the Troy Tegas, fleeing other
mhm,
countries. But yeah, it is time to kind of evolve for us as a species. I've been just very curious. Like for me, learning from Ronit and Leap Forward is like a university. We also get to
mhm,
practice with each other, and I see even with a group of people that I practiced for 4 years, like a basketball team, how hard
mhm,
collective decision making and individual and not to be codependent, not to be authoritarian. It's a dance
mhm.
that you need practice on, just like anything else you want to improve in. So I applaud you for doing it in, for me, like one of the most graceful ways, even with lessons you've learned along the way and with a big heart when you talk about everything. So I appreciate you, man. Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
I appreciate you. I think the last thing, that you just touched on that I would share um, is I don't regret any of the decisions I made, and I have such a deep love for this land. But who you partner with makes a really big difference in your quality of life as you go down the road. And like you can live with neighbors that are challenging, but when you're actively working on a project that has stakeholders that you have a challenge with, that can really maybe take years off your life. The founding investors that we have in Holos are amazing. And you work with one of them or some of them, and I'm so grateful for the support that actually made this project possible. And I'll continue to work with many of them. And then there were some early folks that were involved with Holos that it has not been easy and continues to not be easy, where there's not that same generosity of spirit or same common value set. And so I think that discernment in those early stages of who you partner with, who you work with, you just have to think like, do I want to keep interacting with this person on a week-to-week basis for the next
Yeah.
however many years it takes to get a project off the ground and get homes built? And so that's probably one of the biggest lessons I've learned. And like I said, I wouldn't do anything different because I love this land.
Mm.
But yeah, discernment of and now as we think about I'm going to be up in British Columbia next week looking at a property there. We've been in conversations about a project in Colorado for Holos as well as Portugal. And as I look at these projects, I have to think like it's not just kind of getting married to the people that I am going to engage in these projects with, but also to the land. And is the land like a, enough of a muse for me, or does it feel enough like home or inspiring enough that like I will devote myself to the well-being of this land for the next decade or the rest of my life?
That's
So,
a good child.
these are big long-term commitments and something on a pitch deck or in an idea field or something like an
Yeah.
image that you can create with Chat GPT, and there's beautiful circular homes made out of bamboo. It's all awesome, but the idea field, bringing that idea field down into three-dimensional reality
Mm.
is a whole other skill set and requires some strong devotion. And we've seen some people do it super well here in Costa Rica, and so I'm grateful to be part of a cohort of people like yourself and others that have built beautiful communities and projects in this region that really have their heart in the right place.
Mm.
So,
Appreciate that. Ian Michael, we have a caller here. His name is God, and he's asking, hold on. God is asking, should you focus on one project and then later maybe grow the company and locations? And I don't think we have time to answer that question today, ladies and gentlemen. No, I'm kidding. I do want to ask one question just before we hop off on Holos, on the project that I've seen birth, since the beginning, Holos Costa Rica.
Mhm.
So the community is because a lot of times people don't get it and they're like, so what's there now? So right now, the community is at a healthy place. You have how many residential lots are sold now?
Yeah, it's a 200-acre project that was the aggregation of 7 farms, and there were approximately 40 lots that were for sale, varying from half an acre to 5 acres. And 30 of those have sold, so there's 10 left. There's 8 houses that have been built, and then everyone enjoys a common easement and use of a conservation area that is along the river and up the creeks that protects the waters, and a community farm which we've planted 6,000 trees, we've got greenhouses, there's food produced every week, there's a community dome, the Trapiche, the service program, a co-working area. There's a lot of facilities. There's a chicken palace, there's recycling, workshop. So anyway, we've built out the community infrastructure. And then there's a whole other piece, which is the retreat center, and we do
Mhm.
transformational retreats. We've got 25 beds and some beautiful bamboo structures, temple, kitchen, all of these pieces. And eventually we plan to expand that out in the next year and a half to have a spa, more permanent accommodations, another temple. So it's evolving, but we have a really solid start. I feel like you've gotten to see this for the last 5 years,
Yeah.
and a lot of projects don't make it this far, but it's gotten to a stage where it's real and it's not going anywhere. So,
Yeah, when I walked the skeleton of your house being built, or I saw the base camp, and there was, we had that event that we went to and the dinner, and the rooms were comfortable. And I know you're going to go through an upgrade now and build like a proper center, but as it is, it's a functioning, running, humming organism there that's awesome. So I think it's just, yeah, sometimes it's always looking forward at what's the next phase, but it's also very cool to just, yeah, own how far you've come and see that. And see the place
Mhm.
transform. I think the worst thing for investors is the best thing for the land, which is places transforming slowly and longer than we thought. And so when you said earlier, the one of the big lessons of who you partner with, it's kind of that silent thing, but every dollar has a DNA, as one of our friends, Nathan, says. And those relationships, whether it's people building a project or even a house, or like, I've seen people get a small piece of land together, are everything. So whether it's a micro community or doing a holos or owning a land, if you're going to involve and be involved with other people, that is that level of rubbing and evolutionary learning and seeing if you can
Mhm.
resolve conflict or not, being ready to happen. Nick Rotundo called his workshop, I think, designing for death. You know, death of relationships, death of a project happened in my life. It's in my bio. You helped me. You knew me through parts of that. And
Mhm.
if somebody told me that I could have thought about that ahead, which I was like, no, no, only positive thoughts. I'm in the highest vibration. Wow, I could have saved a lot of time and energy just really
Mhm.
preparing for possible scenarios of things I attached to. So your story
Right.
is one that, yeah, up until today has been a very inspiring and amazing ride to be on. So I'm grateful.
Quite the ride. Thanks for being on it with me, Ed.
Pleasure. All right, my friends. Thank you very much.
Bless you all. Good luck.